Before Coachella, Afropunk, and even Woodstock, there was the little-known Harlem Cultural Festival.
Welcome to the Harlem Cultural Festival.
But because of Black erasure, many of y'all know nothing about this extraordinary moment in American history which took place decades ago. Today's baggage, the legacy of the Harlem Cultural Festival. It was the summer of 1969, a super tumultuous time in American history. The Vietnam War had been in full effect for over a decade, and the civil rights movement was approaching its end.
Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet?
After the assassinations of Malcolm X and Martin Luther King Jr. in 1965 and 1968, respectively, the country reached what seemed like a boiling point.
Even the nation's capital was seared.
In fact, King's death sparked what became known as the Holy Week uprisings back in 1968. People protested in nearly 200 cities all over the country, resulting in 43 deaths. These uprisings were referred to as the greatest wave of civil unrest since the Civil War. King was a source of inspiration to Black people, and with his assassination, it was as though all of that hope was gone. But out of what seemed like a never-ending cycle of hurt, chaos, and despair came joy. Black joy. Just imagine, over 300,000 beautiful Black people, some in church suits, some in dashikis, gathering peacefully in Harlem. Y'all, we were glorious. You'd find big afros, little afros, pressing curls, ponytails, you name it. One festival attendee was even quoted saying that it smelled like chicken and afro chic. The Harlem Cultural Festival took place in Mount Morris Park, which is now known as Marcus Garvey Park. It was the same summer as Woodstock, but it happened first, and it was much less white. Not to mention that the Black Panthers helped with security. This Summer of Soul occurred over the course of 6 Sundays and featured artists like Stevie Wonder, Nina Simone, Gladys Knight, B.B. King, Mongo Santa Maria, and Sly and the Family Stone. And the best part, this festival was free to all. Some of these modern day festivals could take a page out of their book. We've got to acknowledge that this Black Woodstock was the blueprint. Heck, we should be calling Woodstock the White Harlem Cultural Festival. According to the New York Times, earlier renditions of the Harlem Festival took place in 1967 and 1968. But it was the festival in 1969 that should have gone down in history books. But it didn't.
As far as I could see, it was just Black people. It was incredible.
Festival producer Hal Tolchin and host Tony Lawrence organized and documented the festival in '69, recording all of the performances, but the footage sat untouched in a basement for over 5 decades. That is, of course, until Ahmir Questlove Thompson got his hands on the film and transformed it into his directorial debut, Summer of Soul. Thompson says that he was first drawn to the project by the music, which makes sense because and Black music means so much to so many different people. It serves as a form of joy, resistance, and liberation. You see, during this era, African Americans were transitioning from calling for civil rights to demanding Black power. In the film, one subject even says that 1969 was the year that the Negro died and that Black was born. And Black music was the soundtrack behind the movement.
Are you ready, Black people? Are you ready? Are you really ready? Are you ready?
We spoke with Questlove for Unpack That about Summer of Soul.
With Nina Simone having the last word of the festival, I felt like then we had an exclamation point at the end of the sentence instead of just a period. It makes it almost a defiant statement that I felt was needed for the times that we were in.
And through the pain and trauma inherent in fighting for liberation, Black music also served as therapy.
Even without the mental health route that we're taking now, we always had that in us. And for a lot of us, in gospel music and also in jazz music, was a release for creatives to get that out of them. Oftentimes when I play older music of like, James Brown screaming or that sort of thing, to millennials, it's like funny, like, yeah, he sounds funny, like screaming like that. And I was like, well, yeah, on surface, if you're just looking for a GIF or a meme, that could seem funny to you. But what you gotta understand is that might be his only release from committing suicide or doing something worse.
Precious Lord, Take My Hand was Dr. King's favorite song. And Sister Mahalia Jackson was my idol. She was my hero. I loved her so much.
Gospel legends Mahalia Jackson and Mavis Staples performed "Oh Precious Lord" together in tribute to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Years earlier, Mahalia Jackson also sang at the March on Washington and inspired MLK's "I Have a Dream" speech. Back at the Harlem Cultural Festival, Mahalia Jackson and Mavis Staples' performance was absolutely riveting. It was a sight to behold. But Questlove reveals that the duo initially wasn't supposed to perform together.
I found out in my research that one of the last-minute cancellations was Aretha Franklin. That moment actually should have been Aretha Franklin and Mahalia Jackson. With Mahalia and Mavis, I was almost tempted to do a Hollywood ending and make that the end of the film. We decided to put it in the middle because it was so potent and so strong, and I felt like it was the perfect jolt, a climax moment that was needed for the film.
The Harlem Cultural Festival drew in huge numbers, starred Black luminaries, but unsurprisingly was glossed over in American history. Fast forward to the present, and Summer of Soul director Questlove has been very vocal about pitching the film and being rejected many times before it was ultimately picked up. So why are Black stories disposable to white studios?
In the beginning, I found myself almost making excuses because even when they told me about the festival, Sly and the Family Stone, Stevie Wonder, B.B. King, Nina Simone, they're naming all these names. And then I'm thinking like, oh, what, the quality of the tape is bad or something, like unprofessionally shot or something? They're like, no. I was like, what, music clearances? My default was so deep in the denial of having faith in mankind that there had to have been a logical reason why this was denied to us. What I'm learning is that the benign level of racism cuts a little bit deeper because it's done in a passive-aggressive, sort of a dismissive way. It's like that level of being ignored almost steams you more. This isn't the only one. This isn't an anomaly. This is not the only thing. There's more out there. There's going to be an awakening of unearthing of Black stories like never before.
Black erasure is a pervasive form of racism, and it goes beyond the Harlem Cultural Festival. As Quest mentioned, this racism isn't as overt as a burning cross on a lawn. It is subtle and insidious, yet it still maintains white power and privilege. Eliminating the contributions of Black people across the diaspora erases our history and our stories, and ultimately our humanity. As evidenced by the Summer of Soul film, Black people will be seen and heard, whether we're included in history books or not.
Lord.